This video is a year in the making, and what I mean by in a year in the making, I intended to immediately get to work on it after the Spectros video. Then I got distracted and busy, and well, yeah, here we are now. Apologies for taking so long. Fossil Fighters was a series that lasted 3 games and, well, is vaguely similar to Spectros, though it did not have the backing of Disney. The series, similar to the aforementioned game, doesn't exist anymore, though it's more recent than the other. First game sold about 890,000 copies, and the second sold 670,000, which is more than Beyond the Portal and Origins. The third game then went on to sell apparently 420,000, which is surprising, as this means that the game series in total oversold Spectros, and well, I think it died somewhat as a result of the drastic change in the game's formula and its final game's abysmal reviews. The premise of the game is, in effect, collect Vivisaurs, which are collectively evolved dinosaurs, fight them in tournaments to increase your standing amongst a ranking system, and then there's the story, which includes such things as dinosaur aliens that are turning humans into prehistoric mammals, eldritch gods which will consume humanity, an ancient zombie dinosaur sorcerer, and less emphatically, there's also time travel and a human-dinosaur fusion. This game series is kind of wild. The game also suffered from several problems that I think creature collectors that are trying to break into the Pokemon-dominated sphere do, and let's be honest, almost a monopoly in the AAA landscape. Yes, I'm aware of Shin Megami Tensei and other AA series. It didn't have a show, and the plethora of merchandise that exist outside the game format, which, I mean, that seems to be the tying theme between creature collectors that succeed and the ones that fail. The biggest creature collectors that I think have stood at the top of the pyramid are Yokai Watch, Pokemon, and Digimon, which, even with a show, the first franchise has grown dormant, which seemed to also coincide with the ending of the anime and an unsuccessful sequel show. Creature collectors thrive on outside media, which are largely, again, consistent with the standing power of other games, it seems. Now, there's some issues when it comes to talking like I did in the Spectros video of the game and cover what occurred before into the development of the series, like how Phil Barlow and Helen Mayer were jettisoned from their original game, or how Disney's whole restructuring debacle. There's not a lot of info on Fossil Fighters, and I mean even less than Spectros. With Spectros, I could track down several development interviews and developer videos. Those just don't exist for Fossil Fighters. I've looked, and the only thing I can find is a single archived interview, which is actually pretty informative, from the now archived Fossil Fighters webpage. The person behind Fossil Fighters' initial proposal is Shunichi Lee, who states that his initial idea behind the game came from those little fossil toys you sometimes see. If you've ever been in a museum or Walmart, you've probably seen them before. He bought one and excavated it and was disappointed that all the tedium behind it was pointless, considering that the thing was made of plastic and he could have just smashed open the thing without being careful and gotten the same result. He then looked at a DS and apparently thought of the sensation that would come from actually excavating a fossil, and now I'm curious whether or not he's referring to the development kit for the DS, considering an early part mentions that the DS hadn't come out quite yet. So Lee then states that if not for the DS, he would have never been able to come up with the idea. So what we learn from this is that the initial conceptualization of Fossil Fighters dates back at least to 2004, which was supposedly posed by Red Entertainment and before the DS was commercially available. The proposal was pretty similar from what I can gather, which is to dig up fossils, clean them, and then fight with the other dinosaurs, which is pretty basic, but I mean, it's kinda got a nice simplicity to it. It's a game that no matter how you spin it with those basic tenets, kids are going to fall in love with it. Nintendo, however, initially turned it down as a result of being too grand scale and lacking a certain concreteness, though Red Entertainment seemed to take the rejection in stride, beginning to refine their work. Like I mentioned, Nintendo did not like the concept and found it interesting, however, turned down a second revised proposal once again due to scale. Apparently this changed when the battle system was being ironed out, that the game was accepted and would have moved forward. Nintendo then used the proposal for Red Entertainment and had Art Dink handle the game's development, and due to the scale of the game, brought in M2 to help programming. The The first of the prototypes was the cleaning minigame, which is described by Yamagami as interesting in terms of game elements. They got a good feel for the prototype before beginning actual development, and the game took a surprisingly long time to complete, with 3 years from its initial conceptualization and 2 years and some months after, consisting roughly 5.5 to 6 years of total development time, apparently. The initial proposal for the Vivosaur or dinosaur count was 50, but it was Nintendo who actually suggested that they double it and make it over 100. He described his rationale for this as, if you think in terms of making it an interesting game, you need at least 100. He also states that the fact that the elements of gameplay worked really well together with the initial plan, and it showed them how good the initial concept really was. Juno Koda of M2 also then states that while programming, they have a certain process for their back and forth with clients. This time, however, due to the needed level of specifications for the mining, they had ArtDink create a general framework for what they wanted and then devoted someone to exclusively direct the cleaning minigame design. They also focused on the fragility, considering they initially based fragility on actual fossils, which, if you couldn't guess, are really fragile. So they had to adjust in order to allow players to fail and improve. Not really interesting, but both Okada and Yamagami liked the mic-blowing sensation of the DS. Anyhow, the revised cleaning process was also initially deemed too easy, and so they wanted to make it slightly more difficult so that players would focus on it. They described the process as methodical player being able to enjoy digging each part out, getting perfection, while a player who really wanted to get as many dinosaurs as possible can just swing about their hammer freely. They then prose that you can either do battle with a strong few Vivosaurs or with a bunch of them, trying to balance both possible approaches. 7 to 8 months in, there then emerged a problem with the battle system. They were satisfied with the digging and cleaning systems, however, Lee was tasked with designing said battle system. While the cemented idea brought the game to its development stage, there were people around Nintendo who didn't seem to find this prototype really that enjoyable. Unfortunately, in spite of changes to the system, Lee's adjustments didn't fix the issue. They then scrapped the system entirely and opted to remake it. Lee was also aware of this, and before Nintendo's suggestion to remake the system, asked to work on a more orthodox battle system, which led to our more final product today. The initial system also made the battles take roughly 20 minutes, so that would have been very time-consuming. Takaki Seki, a person who worked at Nintendo, also apparently told Lee, "I told you so," when he was made to fix the system. Lee apparently burned out, and after hearing about the extension to modify the battle system said, "My MP is down to 0. The new battle system, which was called for apparently by Yamagami, was that they wanted shorter fights and to think of fights more like team fights than one-on-one conflicts. He was also aware of the tense nature of the other companies and asked for the 3 companies to have a progress meeting so they could all share their opinions and presumably their ideas. The interviewer then asked the opinions of the group about whether or not the changes that the battle system had as the game was close to completion were made often. Yamagami then states that if a finished product isn't fun to play, there is nothing to do but to remake it. Essentially the classic Nintendo adage of a delayed game is eventually good, a bad game is forever. This convinced the team that the battle system needed to be reworked. The team then hunkered down and of course got to work. During this, they also decided that it was necessary to have the ability to train your Vivosaurs through the battles, which was added towards the end of development. This system was apparently in part implemented for people who weren't great at cleaning fossils. This would prevent players from having a bunch of useless Vivosaurs, essentially. Lee then approved of it, and they went ahead. However, on the onset, he was against the idea of training due to his conditioning people to use the same dinos rather than experimenting. The amount of adjustments that were made in the latter half productions even prompted Yamagami Sr. to suggest that quitting might be better. Of course, the team buckled down and finished the game. Now, design is brought up into the conversation, of which Naoto Watabe was in charge of. He apparently took note of the dinosaurs' origins and the descriptions that their IRL excavators had made for them, such as Tyrannosaurus translating to Tyrant Lizard, which to Watabe gave a rock and roll vibe, and Chronosaurus, which stands for Time Lizard, is why it has a clock on its body. They also came up with the idea of Perso after hearing the term Supersaurus at the Makuhari Event Hall where there was a dinosaur exhibition. The line of thinking was super like supermarket and super like big, so they just put a big building on its back. Dinosaurs that were also discovered at the time were also implemented in the game almost immediately, such as the Guanlong. When asked about their bold appearance by the interviewer, Lee stated that it's due to them being a video game. If they made dinosaurs as realistic as they were, all they could do was stomp and bite, so they gave them their elemental attributes and their exaggerated looks. This poor vision was eventually realized in Champions during the time travel portion of the game, and well, Lee was absolutely correct. They also note that there's an announcer for the battle, and that's apparently Lee, or at least a model of himself. A couple more things, the teams were unsure whether or not the game would even be released until they were given a release date for April. The team was apparently overjoyed and all stuck together to make a final push for the game and got it out. The team really enjoyed a part where you have a bunch of masks and they had fun with designing a bunch of them. The game was developed with a lot of love and care, and they were really hoping to convey this in the game. Now, with that being said, there's little else in the way of the other game's developments I can find, so let's begin with first title, Fossil Fighters. Fossil Fighters 1. Right off the bat, our main character's canonical name is Hero, at least in the manga, and he's a prospective fossil fighter in the world of fossil fighters with its prevalent history. Now, quick note on my correction of dinosaurs to vivisaurs. What you are digging are in fact dinosaur fossils, but the revival process transforms the dinosaurs into vivisaurs, which makes sense when you break up the word in vivo, being the prefix for life and saur being lizard, which put together is living lizard. In addition, dino means terrifying, so dinosaur is just terrifying lizard, essentially, but mortosaur might be a better term for the dinosaurs in fossil fighters. Anyway, your journey starts with you being dropped off on the island and being asked a string of A or B questions to determine your character's look, though they never tell you that. You arrive on Vivisaur Island and are greeted by the island's greeting party, as it were, as the island is always looking for more fossil fighters, it seems. We also meet Dr. Diggins, a restrained, messy, and a bit on the absent-minded-sided scientist who invented the revival system we use throughout the game to reawaken the fossils into our Vivisaurs. He's a bit strange and just a tad eccentric. We go through a brief process to get our fighter's license, something that's required to visit any part of the island, seemingly. During this escapade, we also meet Holt, a character who's set up to kind of be your friend, though his impact starts to dwindle throughout the later portions of the story. We also get to see several machines which help to serve in various capacities around the island, with Clean, with a 4 in its name, assisting us in the lab, while Clean with a 3 is in the laboratory specifically. Our first destination and dig site we're allowed to venture into is Greenhorn Plains, which is nice, and we're greeted by Holt. Hero, still a newbie, walks around till he finds a man who says there's an area in the back that contains a bunch of rare fossils. Several people in the back note that there's in fact only garbage in this area, to which a girl named Rosie rushes to us. Everyone who's entered the area had to hand in their medals, which are now stolen, with the exception of ours. Since we're such a newbie, apparently the thief didn't want them. Rosie then asks for us to accompany her back to the fossil center, which the man claimed to be a staff member of. He's obviously not. We then go to the police station and report him, but try our best to investigate on our own. Our first stop is the Fossil Stadium, where we find someone battling with Rosie's stolen medals, though he gives us them back without much gripe after we beat him, and he reports having bought them from a man at the Guild Hall. Heading over to the Guild Hall, we're then informed that the man left back to the Greenhorn Plains. We go back to the Greenhorn Plains, where there he is. We're asked by Rosie to beat him, and we get the medals back, to which he's subsequently arrested by the police chief. It's simple, but that's just how the first chapter goes. Next is Chapter 2, which starts with us getting our Level 2 license from the stadium and being permitted to enter the Knotwood Forest, a rather normal-looking place till we see none other than Rosie arguing with an actual staff member of the Fossil Center, who's currently blocking a path further in as a much more experienced fossil fighter has gone missing while investigating the disturbance. Rosie, not being put off by being told no, goes to visit her grandfather, Mr. Richmond, one of, if not the wealthiest men on the island, who suggests we bribe Diggins, who likes a specific brand of snack cakes. After buying the dino cakes, we go to visit Dr. Diggins, who warns that by letting you into the area, it could risk your lives and potentially be, hurt. You then offer him the dino cakes and he signs off with little hesitation. Of which, of course, whether he should really endanger two kids' lives for some food is brought into question. Venturing further into Knotwood Forest, we find the Dig-a-Dig Chief, simply called the Dig-a-Dig Chief. who's actually quite nice and asks for you to help them since they can't use Vivisaurs as they aren't the biggest fan of them. After you accept his offer to help him and remove the trespassers in the Digadigmid, which is a weird pyramid or a ziggurat that they call the Digadigmid. I can't tell the difference again between pyramid and ziggurat, but they're there. He then cast a blessing on Rosie, which causes her to add a Diga somewhere in every structure. Rosie, of course, doesn't take this as a blessing and asks for it to be removed. However, we're sent in to deal with the problem in the pyramid first. We encounter a dog wielding Vivisaurs, then a weirdly long-nosed man, and the two drop us into a hole in the temple using a trapdoor, which we kinda had all the time in the world to avoid, but it's kinda funny. In the hole we meet the intrepid falsifier who was sent into the pyramid before us, Nevada and Monte Carlo, who happens to be an Indiana Jones parody. I get the Nevada aspect of the name as a parody though, I'm not sure where Monte Carlo is derived from it. Anyhow, you uncover a key to escape the place, and you confront the bandits once again and actually learn their names, with the dog being Rex, long-nosed man is Snivels, and the newly introduced blue-haired girl is Vivian. She's stolen a treasure from inside the chamber, though she doesn't disclose which treasure, instead pushing past us once again to lock us in a room. We find another switch, escape in front of the BB Bandits, which realize I have just now mentioned their name for the first time. The BB Bandits are effectively just the Bad Bunch Bandits. Simple, but effective. You fight them and, well, they give back the treasure, and no one makes any attempts to arrest the BB Bandits. We leave the temple and encounter once more the Digadig chief, who then fixes Rosie's problem, though reveals that it takes a decent amount of time for the effect to wear off. We also, as a reward for the effort and job, we get the totem that the BB Bandits were trying to steal, as the chief didn't think it was treasure. It looked neat is the quote, though no one is sure why they stole it, given the other valuables supposedly located inside the treasure chamber are much more valuable. So you set this one next in your hotel room, and get onto your next level up battle. Next is Rivet Ravine, which you're told there's some trouble being reported by McJunker, a prospector-esque character who more or less runs the mining operation of the ravine, though there isn't any evidence of him having any sort of crew beyond an unnamed apprentice. Someone breaks his minecarts, and you're tasked with getting the tools to fix it throughout the various mine shafts. Stopping you from getting these tools are none other than the BB Bandits. So when you recover all the tools, McJunker goes and repairs it, though he needs a battery, which he asks for you to head back into town to get. Heading there, you find none other than Holt is McJunker's apprentice. And despite knowing it's obviously you, you have to prove that McJunker sent you by fighting him with his V-Raptor and party, which Holt apparently loves V-Raptors. This is mentioned more in the manga. After winning, you go back to Rivet Ravine with the battery in tow and head down further into the mines on McJunker's newly repaired cart. Well, none other than the BB Bandits are of course behind this, and we fight Snivels as well as Rex, though Vivian abstains before the two leave the mines. We then find that they were looking for none other than another tacky idol, which we got again in the first area. We're then given access to another level up battle and become a rank 4 fighter and access the bottoms up bay. The lovely ocean dig site requires us to wear a diving helm, and we're also introduced to denture sharks, sharks who wear dentures to bite people and scare off divers. They've of course cornered Rosie, who after we save tells us about an old shipwreck of Captain Woollybeard. We of course find both the shipwreck and the ghost of Woollybeard, who offers us treasure in exchange for finding his old beard ribbon, which excites Rosie, who spurns us on. The BB Bandits lock us in the room, and an unknown girl destroys the door to the room and frees us, though not intentionally, as she's looking for something. When we go looking for the ribbon, it is in the inventory of a really strange man named Knickknack, who I want to say is this world's equivalent of French, who sends us on a really tedious journey to obtain 3 items: a molted bug shell, a sandal, fossil, and a pair of shark dentures. The journey takes us back to the Digadig village, where initially Rex fights us, and we then go to the chief, who teaches us the hip shaker dance, which causes the bug to shed its exoskeleton, and the girl who initially saved us in the shipwreck looks on in the background. Next is a site in the Greenhorn Plains, where we look for the sandal fossil, after encountering Snivels, and the girl shows up and introduces herself as Duna. As thanks for showing her the dance in the Digadig village, which comes off as strange to the pair as she was snooping on them unbeknownst to them. After we get the Sandal fossil, we head back to Bottoms Up Bay and get the Denture fossil and fight Vivian, so we try to hand the last item in. Knick-Knack then relinquishes the beard ribbon, and we go to give the beard ribbon back. And the BB Bandits, being morons, try to trick Woolly Beard with a fake ribbon and end up pissing him off. We're then tasked to stop Woolly Beard in a Vivisaur fight, which we do, and we give back the actual ribbon, which calms him right down and gives us the treasure. Which, curiously, I'm not sure how Woolly Beard has Vivisaurs, considering that the revival machine is a recent invention by Dr. Diggins. So, weird plot hole maybe. Turns out this treasure was another tacky idol, and Rosie is very disappointed giving us the idol, so our collection now totals 3. We do another level up battle and achieve rank 5. So as a hero normally does, we pass out at the hotel, and upon leaving are informed by Captain Bork, the island's head officer, that Rosie has been kidnapped by the BB Bandits. They're willing to exchange her for the tech idols we've gathered so far. As we're unwilling to hand them over, we beat up a BB lackey and hijack a boat. We then proceed to infiltrate the BB base, systematically take out everyone including our old pals Rex, Snivels, and Vivian, reaching the top and encounter Captain Bulwark, who is none other than the person behind Rosie's kidnapping and also happens to be the BB captain. We beat him up, of course, and the actual honest police show up and arrest Bulwark, and we free Rosie. Another level up battle ensues, and we become a rank 6 fighter, though at the end we're told by Rosie to meet with her that night at the park. Rosie, along with the hero, reveal some clear feelings for one another, and we head back to the hotel and pass out. The next day we are greeted by 2 fans who seem to be attempting to intimidate us about our chances in the next level up fight with our last opponent, Sarhead. Dr. Diggins then asks us to investigate the supposed last idol, which is in an active volcano, and upgrades our sonar to help us find it. We're also informed that the BB Bandits have escaped, but you know, the police are on their case, and there are earthquakes in that same active volcano, so things are clearly going well. When we arrive, there's a boulder blocking the way, which Duna shows up and helps us by blowing it up with a ray gun before walking off without an explanation. Further in, there's another boulder blocks our way. Duna blows it up again, sticking around as we locate the last idol before trying to steal it from us. She then transforms into a dinosaur-like creature after her hologram disguise is disrupted by the heat. She then attempts to attack us, but after losing, there is an earthquake which causes a boulder to fall and pin her underneath it. The hero, of course, saves her, which confuses her before she flees. We then head back to the island and give Richmond the last idol, only to then awake the next day with the BB Bandits, or more specifically Captain Borks, having not only escaped, but has taken over the island, so naturally having stopped him before, we go to confront him again. Though this time he fights with a Vivisaur dubbed Frigosaurus, which none of the Vivisaurs in my arsenal can put a dent in. Captain Bulwark beats us up and throws us into jail, where if not for a helpful Rex showing up, that would have been the end of us. A small pocket resistance forms around Dr. Diggins and Mr. Richmond. The BB Bandits have also joined our side due to Dr. Bulwark's blatant disregard for them. We're then sent to see the Digidig Chief, again since he apparently got tricked into giving Bulwark the fossil. The Digidig Chief then informs us of a fossil belonging to Ignosaur, the presumed opposite to Frigosaurus, in Mount Lava Flow. Though the lava has hidden the entrance to the location, so once again we regroup with the Resistance, who informs us there's a valve in the volcano to turn off the magma flow. I don't know how it exists, but it does. You and Rex, who now has a translation device thanks to Dr. Diggins, and past some minor walls that need us to dig up a symbol to prove our worth, I think, we're then allowed into the small hovel and find us the Ignosaurus fossil. Dr. Diggins helps us revive it, and we then fight the Bulwark, who easily loses to our Ignosaurus. And, well, we put him away for good, we hope. The conflict between the 2 legendary Vivisaurs also destroys them, and so we're kind of back to square one. Then we hand over the 4th idol to Dr. Richmond for safekeeping and turn in for the night. We of course have another level up battle, our final level up battle against Sarhead, which after 2 preliminary matches and beating us informs us he wasn't even using his real team of Vivisaurs. And before we leave for the day, we get a letter dropped in front of us from Duna, who wants to meet us at the park. Getting to the park that night, Duna begins talking to us and informs us of that form we saw back in Mount Lava Flow is her real form. Duna is part of the Dinarian race, an ancient alien species whose first evolutionary ancestors were in fact dinosaurs. Duna herself tells us that the Dinarians themselves don't like humans all that much, and actually look down on humans as a species, though she's now experiencing doubts since we saved her. Asking if Dinarians and humans went to war, would we still save her, and I informed her yes, which seems to make her happy as she gives the protag a peck on the cheek. Night falls, we presumably went back to the hotel, and we wake up before heading into the lobby. Rosie finds us and informs us of a breakthrough with the idols at a secret lab in the Richmond building. She tells us this in broad daylight in the very public hotel lobby, kinda negating the point of it being a secret in the first place. Anyway, the idols are alien tech, which, putting 2 and 2 together, it's ancient Dinarian tech. We head over to the Richmond building where what appears to be a giant rat attacks Rosie before letting loose onto the streets, and we also meet a traumatized bodyguard who's unable to speak about what happened. We head down into the secret lab and find Duna and a new unknown Dinarian threat stealing the idols. Our new assailant reveals himself as a Raptin, and explains to us a lot of what has already been implied throughout the story, such as Dinarians are the ones who hired the BB bandits to snatch the idols, and the Dinarians are trying to wipe out humanity. Raptin, after finishing his explanation, shoots Rosie with a gun that turns her into the rat thing that we saw in the first area. After learning, it begs the question who the rat thing was we saw in the lobby. The game never addresses it, but might be the second guard. Rosie bites Raptin, who throws her away and then attempts to shoot us with a laser gun, though it doesn't have enough energy to turn us into a rat, which is nice, but we are knocked out, with Duna apologizing to us as the Dinarians make their escape. We wake up in the lab with Dr. Diggins and Mr. Richmond, who then informs us that Rosie wasn't turned into a rat necessarily, just reverted to an early mammal, apparently pivotal for the evolutionary process called Trichondontus. Sorry for my pronunciation. And we need to find a way to turn Rosie back to her normal self. Rosie in rat form then hands us this pendant, which is the Dinarian teleporter, sending us to the Dinarian mothership, which we're immediately spotted in by a random Dinarian who doesn't report us back because they think we're just in disguises, slightly implying that there's more Dinarians all over the planet, a la lizard people. We then head back to Earth using the same teleporter, and then the devise a scheme to sneak back on with Dr. Diggins using Sarhead's mask. We fight Sarhead, take which he reveals is a second mask underneath his first mask, and when we ask for a second mask for Dr. Diggins, he reveals a third mask is underneath. Sarhead, apparently at any given time, wears 30 masks, which must be so uncomfortable. Anyway, we go to Dr. Diggins, who's made some weird teleporters so incredibly fast, which we use to invade the mothership again and begin investigating the Dinarians. We learn the Dinarians are millions of years old and believed to have seeded intelligent life on the planet, and they believe that after all this time, humans are an unintended branch of that seeded intelligent life. Now, during those several million years waiting period, the Dinarians engaged in what's called stone sleep, which seems to be pretty similar to the imperva ray that Bohr used, though you can awaken those stone sleep. We also learn that the idols are subcomputers, to which is generally a giant idol computer whose job it is to correct the Dinarian evolutionary process should it go wrong. It went wrong, presumably, and created humans, so should the idols be reactivated, we're looking at an extinction level of humanity. We go to stop the idols and confront the King of Dinarians, Dynal, who is joined by Duna and offers her the button press that'll end humanity. She refuses, though, after believing humanity isn't less than Dinarians and can't go through with it. Dynal then chooses to push past her and turn it on. On this, we step in and fight him, which Dr. Diggins says he'll remove one of the smaller idols to disrupt the main computer. We defeat Dynal, though with a last push, he presses that button, but Diggins removes in removing an idol. There's an unintended consequence, however, as Diggins is sent back through time and we escape thanks to Duna. Back with Mr. Richmond, he tells us Rosie's back to normal and the team regroups to find these idol pieces, and we're sent back in time, split into 5 locations. Rosie and our hero are supposed to set out together, though the excitement causes Rosie to turn back into Rat Rosie. Gathering the pieces and bringing them back, we see that a single piece is still missing. Mr. Richmond proposes that it's in the secret site, of an ancient Dinarian scouting ship, which contains the technology that was originally used to create Vivisaurs. Heading to the crash site with Duna, we begin investigating these stone tablets written by Dr. Diggins, who details a 6-month journey in the Jurassic period, barely making it to the ship. We learn that Diggins somehow put himself into stone sleep with the idle computer we need. Rapton interrupts us, however, and attempts to take the idle computer and Dr. Diggins' body, I assume. Another fight, and Rapton loses in disbelief, and we head back to the base to revive Diggins, who's in stereotypical caveman garb and is surprisingly fine and gives us the last piece which we need to bring to Dr. Richard, who strangely asks us to reassemble the idol, claiming to just want to make sure it's complete. After assembling it, the second Richmond shows up and reveals that the first one is actually King Dynal, who freezes everyone with a paralyzing ray and goes to place the idol back on the ship. So we go to the ship alone, fight the guards, and tackle King Dynal in a fight which determines humanity's fate. We win, and King Dynal ends up conceding, deciding that humanity is worth living, with us saying that Dinarians and humans can live together. However, Rapton doesn't see it that way, and presses the button which should end humanity, but nothing happens, which is when the idols reveal they're alive. The idols informs us of several things, such as the fact that the seeds of life that the Dinarians planted died out, and humans and Dinarians followed completely different paths. It also informs us that Main Idol didn't know what to do after this, and decided that the best way to proceed then was to summon Gunnash, the very being that destroyed apparently the original Dinarian homeworld. The sub-idols decided to disconnect themselves to prevent this, but their reaction must mean that Gunnash is on its way. Everyone, now seemingly more friendly of one another, meet up at the Fossil Center and discuss plans. One suggestion is that Dinarian's mothership is used as an ark to save humanity, though the ship isn't big enough to save everyone before it's suggested that we destroy Gunnash, which Dynal states is impossible. Dr. Diggins, however, studied Gunnash back on the crashed scouting ship, and discovered that Gunnash needs 3 brains to survive, and that destroying them together, you can defeat him, and that using the teleportation device of the Dinarians, we can get inside Gunnash and destroy his brains head-on. So the game actually interestingly now gives you 2 choices of who to bring with you to fight Gunnash as backup, Rosie or Duna, your 2 closest companions in the game. I'm going to delve into, of course, both choices. If we choose Rosie, we enter the teleporter and head inside Gunnash's mouth, and Rosie freaks out after not being told that the brains are located inside its mouth. We fight the brains and win, defeating Gunnash, causing him to explode, and in order for us and Rosie to survive as the teleport is working, we put ourselves into self-induced stone sleep, holding hands as Gunnash is destroyed. We wake up back in the Fossil Center and are informed by everyone that Rosie woke up but is suffering from amnesia as a side effect of the stone sleep. She's forgotten pretty much everything and there's seemingly no way for her to remember us until Chief Dig-a-Dig shows up and tells us to use the hip shaker dance. And while it works, Rosie's memory is restored, and later the 2 meet up at the pier, where Rosie thanks the hero and promises that even if things get rough, the 2 will stick together, and ends with the 2 looking at the stars. Choosing Duna, events play out similarly, though Rosie is very angry that we didn't choose her to go with Gunnash. Duna, in contrast to Rosie, when entering Gunnash, is pretty calm and collected. We fight Gunnash and he explodes seemingly in the same fashion, and when we wake up, we're met by everyone at the Fossil Center yet again. We're informed by the group, however, that Duna hasn't woken up from her stone sleep, and can't, seemingly with the Dinarians opting to go off-world for a cure. We're, of course, interrupted by the Dig-a-Dig Chief. We use the hip shaker dance and bring Duna back to life. The 2 meet up pier, and Duna tells us that she'll be close by and our #1 fan, ending again with us looking at the stars. Credits roll, and there are some minor tie-ups in the credits. Dr. Diggins opts to still wear the caveman garb, stating it's comfortable and wondering if it's a good idea for the uniform for everyone. Wendy, who apparently is the receptionist, shoots it down. The BB trio are doing community service, getting themselves out of a prison sentence. Bulwart's planning his revenge, though seems to be somewhat dissuaded by the threat of having all his meals be carrot sandwiches. Sarhead, happy that we succeeded and looks forward to another fight. Nevada Monte Carlo finds something at the Dig-a-Dig mid. Woollybeard seems to be having fun being a ghost. McJunker kisses his minecarts while Holt watches on in horror. Richmond wonders what we'll be doing going forward, and Raptin and Dynal discuss living among humanity, and depending on who you choose to go with, you to Gunnash, you get 2 optional scenes. If you choose Duna, you get to see a scene which Rosie, bored now with everything, largely settled down and decides to go visit us, only to realize that she's still suffering from the side effects of the original Dig-a-Dig spell and the reversion way. If we choose Rosie, Duna approaches 2 strangers and attempts to talk to them, only for the 2 to fall madly in love with Duna and chase after her in an attempt to woo her. And that's it for the main story, though there are some post-game side quests and stories for you to check out. There's a time machine that Dr. Diggins is working on and needs 3 parts to get it: a piece of goldenite from Nevada, a diver's watch from Woollybeard, and an idol component from King Dynal. Side note, I wonder if this is the component from the main idol, considering it was the one that did send Gunnash to the planet and they disassembled it afterwards. Anyway, you can use this time machine to go fight Gunnash again and seeing the ending without restarting the game. After defeating Gunnash the second time and seeing the ending, you get the ability to use all 3 Gunnash's brains in any fight you want. You unlock 2 new dig sites, one of which is Parchment Desert, a desert so hot that your sonar doesn't work, something that somebody seemed to point out is weird considering our sonar works out in an active volcano. Just fine, but video game logic. A man there asks you to help plant oasis seeds so that the desert cools and then you can use your sonar, which requires you to buy 4 oasis seeds for 20,000 gold each, for a total of 80,000 gold. It's quite expensive. Anyway, your reward for fixing the oasis are basically the ability to excavate strong Vivisaurs and a thanks from the old man. The second dig site is Cold Feet Glacier, whose quest can only be started after Parchment Desert. A girl by the name of Margaret informs us of a Yeti-esque being called Unga Unga, who runs away the first time you meet. You go to Richmond, who tells you that you can buy snowberries, which Unga Unga apparently likes, and after giving Unga Unga the berries, you return to Richmond, who gives you a mask, and wearing it back to the glacier, Unga Unga will give you a fossil, and apparently it's predetermined 11 times which fossil you get, and afterwards it's randomized, which is a very strange number. The chief has you do more hip shaking before you're initiated into apparently the super secret hip shaker club. There's a fossil samurai who you can fight. He's the guy apparently who's been yelling at you, your neighbor, that he doesn't care about you. You can then fight Sorehead again at his full strength, which rewards you with Ignosaurus. Then fight the BB trio for Frigosaurus, and then you can fight Dynal, Raptin, and Duna together to get their fighting forms, to obtain the Dinarians as Vivisaurs, including the first game. So the start of Fossil Fighter Champions is with you choosing your choice of boy and girl, whose default names are Dino and Dina. You and your best friend Todd are on a mountain when Todd suggests that he's heard rumors of wild Vivisaurs roaming the mountain and that you should look for them. Keep in mind that Todd fully acknowledges that you should go and look for superpowered dinosaurs for seemingly no reason. The character, for some reason, decides to go along with this and are almost immediately attacked by an ally, who, according to the game, is the strongest neutral type Vivisaur, so good job, Todd. We run away and, lo and behold, a cowboy riding a pterodactyl swoops in to save us. Todd recognizes the cowboy as none other than Joe Wild West, the world's most famous fossil fighter, possibly hinting at Sorehead's retirement or his fall from grace. Anyway, he informs us that Allosaurus will only calm down if we beat it in a fossil battle, and we're given the choice of 4 Vivisaurs to use: Syntosaurus, Aristosaurus, Toba, or Dimetrodon. So Joe teaches you, and you tame the savage beast back into its dino metal. We're then informed that Vivisaurs that are abandoned after revival have a tendency to go feral and become very aggressive. In a way, it kinda justifies fossil battles, but at the same time makes me question what happens if they as dino metals are never used, are in the PC, like, are they just pissed off constantly but are unable to escape? So Joe leaves us there after letting us keep the Vivisaur, and we devote ourselves to becoming fossil fighters. Champions. Roll credits. We cut to 2 years later, and our heroes head to Joe Wild West Callistio Islands. And would you be shocked to find we've practically done nothing to advance the goal? We still have a single Vivisaur, and Todd gets a single Stego. The fact that Todd has a Stego implies that there should be some fossil excavating outside of the island. So, what have we been doing for 2 years? And we're told we won preliminaries, and I'm wondering if everyone on our competitions only brought a single Vivisaur to fight. Like, it's crazy that we've done nothing since then, but it's just a slight nitpick. Continuing, we land on Rebuilder Isle, the first of the 3 islands in the Callistio Islands chain. We're greeted and then told by said greeter that we need to register for the upcoming tournament, so we do that and a tutorial of various game mechanics ensue. We're then informed on how the tournament opponent selection works, which is apparently completely random. We're given paleo pagers and take note of the little guy in the bottom left corner of the pager for later. A cutscene then plays with Joe Wild West introducing the Cup attendees to the island and then announces that the winner of the Cup will become the owner of all the islands, shocking everyone, including Todd, who tells us that we've got to win the grand prize no matter what, and so we're given access to the first of the dig sites, Treasure Lake. And we dig and revive our first few Vivisaurs. We're also then introduced to Rupert, the son of Fossil Dig Inc., owner and the primary Vivisaur equipment supplier. Apparently there's no mention of the Richmond Foundation yet, so what they're doing right now is up in the air. Rupert and Todd get into an argument, fight, and Rupert whoops Todd, and then comes time for round 1, and despite what should be 128 competitors, our first round fight is with none other than Todd. Just so you know, that is a 0.0078125% chance of happening. The occurring chance of less than 1% of that exact matchup, if my math is right. Anyway, we whoop Todd round 1 and eliminate him from the tournament. So, certainly a way to start a story. Todd takes it in stride, however, to Rupert's surprise, and we get the next dig site, the Jungle Labyrinth. There we find a collapsed and incapacitated man who needs a weird melon because he's for some reason let himself starve so bad he can't crawl to the entrance less than 50 feet from him. Once he eats the melon spud that we find, he reveals himself as the curator of the museum on Cranial Isle, and tells us about a Cleo plate, which details a sorcerer named Zonga Zonga who once ruled the islands and would hold a tournament to select a new vessel. Despite the implications based on the ongoing events, none of the characters make the obvious connection, and the curator leaves wishing us luck in our endeavors. Going further into the forest, 2 men and an Elvis impersonator run out screaming about a monster in the jungle, and Todd joins us. Technically not a monster, but a girl wearing a mask jumps out of the bushes and freaks Todd out. We then search for the monster with Pauline, the girl in the mask, and find out the monster is a scam by 2 people to scare off everyone, and so we defeat them and we're banished from the island. Setting up the second round of the tourney with us versus the Elvis impersonator, and turns out the Elvis impersonator was in on the scam, and after beating him, he too is banished from the island. Next up is the dig site on the Cranial Isle, which once we arrive on the island, Scatterly, the curator from before, greets us and shows us another tablet he had, which further highlights Zonga Zonga's previous rule over the island. We then head to the island and find Todd already hard at work on the island, and eventually meet up with Rupert, who's testing a new product for his father that'll help digging. It malfunctions and we have to stop it with it. And we effectively build a rapport with Rupert and slowly begin unraveling the not-so-great home life he has. Return to the plaza of the Isle, where the giant TV from before informs us that somehow a gang has invaded the dig site that we were just at, despite the only entrance being an admittedly unsafe land bridge. They're known as the BB Brigade, or the Bare Bones Brigade, headed by Don Boneyard, and they've also sealed the entrance with a boulder. With the help of Rupert's robot, which receives its first form of praise from us, we make it past, and along with Rupert defeat the BB Brigade, who are using Bonysaurs, or just skeletal Vivisaurs really. Round 3 of the tourney happens, and we fight some rando, and Joe makes another announcement of how we'll defeat the BB Brigade, and life goes on. Rainbow Canyon opens up, and we, along with Todd, go to explore it. We're then introduced to Joni and Madame Pooch, as they're both tourney competitors, and she shows us this lovely fruit bowl. We go and explore further till we meet a girl who looks strangely like Pauline without a mask on, who's stating she's missing a mask. This mask is none other than the fruit bowl that Joni has, who won't relinquish it without a boss battle, and once we do, she thanks us. We then escape and attempt to return the mask before it's revealed that the BB Brigade have kidnapped all the girls into a cave to stop them from participating in the tournament. So we follow up on the tip, and well, the girls are being pampered by one of the BB Brigade commanders. The whole ploy he had was to stop the girls from participating in the tournament, and if the girls stop, the guys will lose interest since there's no one to impress, and until we got there, it was working apparently. And after we defeat him, with no one to pamper, the girls leave. We give the mask back, and Todd finally realizes that the girl was Pauline, who he's ashamed to say is cute. Round 4 is then announced, and we fight one of the kidnapped girls, who's disappointed she didn't get some juice she requested. We beat her, meet back up with Todd, and are told by Joe and requested to see Pauline alongside us. We gather as we ascend to his suite. Joe commends the three of us and appoints us as effectively his deputies of the Celestial Patrol Team to stop the BB Brigade. The last of the 3 islands then opens up to us, and we head to Ilium Isle and explore the new hot springs dig site that's now opened up. We see Pauline practices talking to a snowman, revealing some possible social anxiety that's obfuscated when she wears her mask. And after leaving the site, we go see Rupert's father, who shows up to tell Rupert that if he loses the tournament, it'll be bad for investors, and then leaves. Joe then requests for us, and we get our first assignment as the patrol team to find the Princess of Nomadistan, who in a picture appears to be Joni. Asking around, we find Joni eventually back in the jungle labyrinth along with Madame Pooch, who's being harassed by some dog-loving creep. Fighting off the dog-loving creep, we see Joni dragged away by Todd and Pauline in an attempt to claim the reward, while we're left with the dog. Pauline and Todd argue about who gets the reward since they both brought Joni back, only for the Prime Minister of Nomadistan to reveal when we arrive with Madame Pooch that Madame Pooch is actually Princess Pooch Poochamin, and Joni is merely her handler. Turns out the people of Nomadistan resolve their political strife by electing a dog to power and have since always had a dog as a ruler, similar to Alaska having Stubbs the cat. The princess then convinces the minister that she should be able to stay somehow, and then the hot springs are opened up. We visit hot springs where Todd is, and he almost immediately jumps in, and we're supposed to follow him until the hot springs turn into jelly, specifically grape jelly. We're tasked with reversing this and inform Kent, the Ilium Park's ranger, who informs us apparently the hot water comes from Mount Krakenak, and so we go there, ending up recruiting Rupert in the process. And heading to the site, we find the BB Brigade and another of its commanders, Lester. We confront Lester, who informs us that if another attempt at stopping the tournament, and after stopping the jelly and returning it to the water, back at Ilium Village, we explain to Kent what happened, and Todd is of course free, but apparently smells of grape jelly. Pauline follows behind us and is upset considering Rupert got involved and she didn't, though taking it into some thoughts, she decides that the team should add Rupert into their roster. Rupert takes a second to deliberate, thanking us for the offer before his father waltzes in and tells him that his actions endangered the reputation of the company. How a fighter or a member of the company rescuing its citizens would be considered a negative on reputation is beyond me, though his father encourages him to focus on winning round 5 as a way to repent for his actions before leaving. Rupert then politely declines our offer and tells us of his former love of what's effectively battling, and that's become the face of Fossil Dig Inc., where it became a job, and thanks us of reminding him of his precious love for battling before leaving. We then cut back to Don Boyard, who recommends both Cole and Lester for not stopping the tournament successfully before a new commander makes her appearance, Lola, and she suggests a new course of action that might work. Back to us, we're given ice grips to Ice Grip Plateau, a dig site made of ice flows and fossils, which, upon entering initially, were met with Pauline, who's once again practicing speaking without her mask, and this time we approach her as she puts her mask back on. She's angry that we spied on her, and then we admit to watching her back at the hot springs, and she's even more pissed, which, fair enough. However, she comes to accept the situation considering we weren't trying to hurt her, and explains that the mask is magical in nature and gives her the natural boastful attitude she has up till now. Her natural state is quite shy, in which she struggles to speak without said mask, though she promises that she'll take the mask off by the end of the tournament, and we press on. We find Scatterly again, and he finds yet another tablet further detailing the majestic vessel as a cruel fate, though Joe interrupts us and informs us of another team meeting. We head over to Joe, and it's just Pauline and us as Todd is suffering from a sudden fever, and Joe informs us that 3 parks run on what is effectively super batteries or, well, electrofossils, and someone stole them. Not necessarily sure who was protecting those, but they should be fired. And while the city is still functioning on less energy-efficient fossils, we need to go retrieve them. So we head to the Ice Cream Plateau, which is, to be fair, is what Joe just used the pager and told us that the thieves were at the Ice Cream Plateau. We could have saved a lot of time. Before we leave the building, we find Rupert, who Pauline implores us to join in the mission, though he again denies after being reprimanded by his father. We head back, of course, though lacking our third party member, it's none other than Lola, along with the other 2 commanders, who for some reason decided that hiding in the Ice Cream Plateau plains instead of taking it back to their, for now, secret base is quite a strange decision from them. The fight isn't necessarily fair, with it being 2 against 3, though the tide of battle changes when a reluctant Rupert joins us, deciding it's better to be friends than to seek out his father's approval. Winning our fight with the 3, we go to take back the Electrominites, which, before we're interrupted, are swallowed by a whale dubbed the Bone Hemoth, who apparently just likes to chew the ice of the ice crypt flows, so it was unintentional that he ate us. Inside Bone Hemoth, we meet Robinson, a fisherman who was apparently swallowed by Bone Hemoth 10 years ago, and he's more or less been alone for 10 years. He informs us that there's no way to get out, before considering that if Tonzilla, Behemoth's tonsil, is defeated, Bone Hemoth might spit us up. Before we tackle the tonsils, we find that BB Brigade commanders were also eaten by Bone Hemoth, and they explain they don't really know why Don Boneyard wants to stop the tournament, but regardless, we tackle Tonzilla and defeat the tonsil, triggering Bone Hemoth's gag reflex, and we're shot out of its blowhole. After what I hope is a long shower, Robinson, more or less, thanks us for helping him escape, and we are given the Super Electrominites as a sort of thanks for helping them. Approaching Joe, Rupert proposes being an official member and is inducted into the patrol team, and heading down to the lobby, Pauline questions why the sudden change of heart in Rupert considering his father's scorn, and he states that he'd like to begin standing up to him, and more or less wants to reclaim his love for battling. Pauline is inspired by this as well and decides she's going to take off her mask, though it's suddenly stuck to her face despite its earlier ability to be removed. She runs away and we go to chase after her before being stopped by her grandfather, who's none other than the Dig-a-Dig chief from the first game, and his comment about sore backs denotes that this game almost certainly takes place after the first, begging the question as to why the original protagonist isn't taking a shot at this fight, and also what's happening with the Dinarians right now. Anyhow, the chief informs us that the mask again is magical and comes at an unstated cost for its ability. The nature of it is likely the mask imbues the person with its original wearer's personality, along with some level of sentience, so when Pauline gained the confidence to take it off, it latched on her face as a sort of defense mechanism. We ask around where she might be and find out she's back at Rainbow Canyon, the place where she originally returned her mask to. The mask takes a bit more control of her and forces Pauline to fossil battle us, and the mask falls off from her face once we beat it. She's thankful when Rupert along with the chieftain arrive into the cave, and he insists on destroying the mask, though Pauline interferes. She's admittedly thankful to the mask for its help and wants it taken care of, sending it back to the village with her grandfather. As a result of the power outages from earlier, the next part of the tournament is delayed until tomorrow. We meet up with Rupert and Pauline at a campsite who all talk about their ambitions and are incredibly happy with their own progress, only being disappointed that the cup has to come to an end, but everyone will give it their all in the next few rounds. Night passes and we find Robinson in Ilium Plaza as he returns to Bone Hemoth, realizing he doesn't feel comfortable with being part of civilization anymore. Thus returns to the whale, which, fair. The semifinals begins and our opponent is Pauline, and she's happy to battle us for her first time without the mask. Defeating her, she's sad, but she's really happy that she's growing more confident on her own, and then there's a handful of fans who chase after her, seeing how beautiful she is, but a chime sounds not long after battle, and Rupert steps out victorious, setting the 2 of us in the finale. Todd also happens to stop by to congratulate us, so that happens and one last dig site becomes available. We cut to Don Boneyard again, and Lola reports her failure with Don Boneyard opting to take matters into his own hands. The last location is a desert place called Dusty Bones, and of course, Scatterly is there and once again collapsed to my bemoaning. We give him some water to help him recover. We get to the last tablet, which informs us that the people rose up against Zonga Zonga eventually and overthrew him, and then set his accursed skull in a stone pyramid to be sealed away. He leaves, and then the whole island begins to shake. We get another TV message, and Don Boneyard informs us that he plans to sink the island, and that everyone should evacuate. The team meets up with Joe, who invites Scatterly to help come up with a solution to the sinking issue. Scatterly informs us that the islands are held up by a special structure called the Spinal Pillar, which, along with the island's name, makes me wonder if at some point the island was a dinosaur of sorts, along with the same lines of Frigosaurus and Ignosaurus. Will it officially dub it, or unofficially dub it, Gaiasaurus, because I think it sounds cool and it's a fun theory. So, in order to reinforce the spinal pillar, we need to inject it with calcium from a special fossil called the Sardinosaurus. We get the fossil from a new location dubbed the Petrified Forest, though beyond the Sardinosaurus, it really is insignificant. So, heading back, the team is informed that we need to reinforce one of each vertebrae that's located at the bottom of the islands. Unfortunately, the sub that was initially supposed to help us is inoperable, so we opt to use Bonehemoth to take us beneath the islands. So we fight with Cole, who's actively destroying the spinal pillar, and after defeating him, repair out the section of the pillar. We save the island, and in fleeing of the other commanders, we're able to track the actual base of the BB Brigade, a location which makes me question how no one found them out sooner. Anyway, we fight our way up to the tower as a patrol team, with the exception of good old Todd. Anyway, we fight our way up to Don Boneyard, and eventually, who actually notes that he might have seen us before. We beat him, and the Don Boneyard calls our name and informs us the tournament can't be allowed to continue. Joe interrupts, though, and rounds up everyone before setting us back for the final round of the tournament. Todd appears after we get back and notes, "This is also weird that Don Barnyard would know our names, though he doesn't think it especially noteworthy considering we're finalists in this tournament." He's trying to stop. So the final match is all but set to begin, with Rupert's father apparently deciding he's not allowed to participate for fear that Rupert might lose to us. Rupert doth protest, stating that fossil battles are fun and he enjoys them, which Rupert's father of course disagrees, believing that they're cold and calculated and that data is all that really matters in a battle, and shows off a dual disc of sorts, which allows a person to battle using two Vivisaur teams at the same time, and calculates we've only got a 5% shot of winning, which makes it all the worse when it's among the easiest fights, in my opinion, in the game, and we almost absolutely decimate him, though I think maybe the ease of it may be a story beat. When we beat him, he's shocked that we couldn't foresee this outcome, and Rupert also succeeds in his fight, of course stating in the aftermath that he doesn't care if he loses in the final round, and that he enjoys battling and just wants to give it his all. Then Rupert's dad justifies his actions somehow by saying he'd be heartbroken if he ever lost. I don't see how that validates his prior treatment in the story, but it's apparently enough for Rupert, so who am I to say? Anyway, the final battle proceeds, and we of course emerge victorious, and I don't know why, but he opts to only use 2 Mappos and an evolved Mappo, dubbed a Mappo King. It's kind of a boring fight for his final battle with us, in my opinion. So we're celebrated, and Rupert, while sad, is glad we got the chance to battle. Joe then comes down to personally congratulate us on our achievement and invites us to his suite, so we can have a private discussion with us over the island. Todd and Pauline also send their regards, though Todd follows us up to our meetup with Joe. Though, as one would expect, Joe isn't exactly happy with the proposed one-on-one becoming a one-on-two, though he disregards this, saying it really doesn't matter. If you're actually paying attention to his ongoing dialogue, though, this section you'll notice a lack of y'alls and other typical southern slang associated with the cowboy-like characters and Joe to this point. He begins to talk about Zonga Zonga and his origin, and then begins discussing how he's sealed away into the stone pyramid. His details begin to expand beyond what the tablets say, and then he tells us that someone who opened Zonga Zonga's chest and proclaims that it was Joe Wild West who originally opened it. At this point, it's readily apparent that Zonga Zonga is controlling Joe Wild West, and this tournament was a new effort to get a new majestic vessel, i.e. the winner of the tournament, i.e. you. We try to escape through the elevator before Zonga Zonga can take over our body, though he somehow locked it, and we're then prevented with a cutscene in which Bone Patera, Vivisaur, breaks through the walls, and we're given the opportunity to escape. We end up at the BB Brigade base and find Don Boneyard's skull, who relays the fact that he is the original Joe Wild West, albeit now just a living skull, and more or less helps affirm that this by recalling the day he saved us 2 years ago. He more or less found the Bonosaurus, which I'm not sure how they actually work in terms of lore, and founded the BB Brigade to stop the tournament and prevent Zonga Zonga. We decide that it's best to follow up on the lead of Scatterly's earlier tablets, which told us there was a way to defeat him, and go over to the Cranial Town talking to Scatterly, who takes a second to believe us, but comes around to the whole Don Boneyard is Joe thing. Outside, however, Zonga Zonga, again in Joe's body, tricks all the staff leaders with everyone else on the island that we were working with Don Boneyard and that we've been rigging the tournament, so we'd win. We decide to skedaddle before we're caught through Pauline, and Rupert sees us, and they're, of course, on our side. However, the staff leaders begin to surround us before, in a shock, Todd steps in and sends out his stego to hold off all 3 staff leaders and apologizes for cowardice. We're able to flee back to the brigade base, and everyone decides it's best to investigate the stone pyramid that Joe found in order to get the tool we needed to stop Zonga Zonga, not before we get a dinosaur mask as a disguise. Searching the temple, we, in the jungle labyrinth, discover an inscription of the stone chest, which tells us of a device known as the Callistio Pipsqueak, was once used to knock the skull out of Zonga Zonga's vessel, and then he was sealed in the chest. We fight the guardians of this temple and get the Pipsqueak. Also, despite the implication of the guardian being a simple, possibly interesting Bonisaurus or Vivosaur, it's just 3 B-rank B-Rexes. So we head back to confront Zonga Zonga, while Scatterly stays behind to get the chest prepared to reseal the sorcerer. Pauline and Rupert this time hold off the staff leaders while we go and take on Zonga Zonga. Though guarding the elevator in a brainwashed state, Todd, who makes his several statements about being jealous that we beat him, which makes sense honestly, Todd afterward then steps out of it and apologizes about what he said, but to be fair, I feel his pain though. If you were in a tournament and you lost to the first seed and were just knocked out and then just had to watch as the person who beat you and is supposedly your best friend gets to live both your dreams on their own, it wouldn't exactly be nice. Anyway, we go up and confront the skeletal sorcerer, and he knocks our one weapon to beat him, and is immediately knocked out of that hole Joe's B-Terra then had to destroy earlier. Todd, however, decides he can climb down the tower and get it. He then looks insane, though we fight Zonga Zonga till he's defeated, which is pointless without the Pipsqueak hammer, that Todd somehow has actually saved. We get the hammer, bash the skull out of Joe's body, and everyone frantically scrambles to get the skull, with Rupert and the skull going down the elevator. We eventually follow Rupert down, who has a skull and says he knocked out Zonga Zonga's skull. I don't know how he knocked out its skull, so we go to seal it back in the temple when the skull regains consciousness and tell us it's in fact Rupert, and we see a giant island rise from the ice grid plateau as Zonga Zonga's temple and castle. We regroup, and there's feasibly no way to actually get there with a Vivosaur, and we come up with a plan to shoot ourselves out of a fossil cannon, which is actually pretty cool considering they integrate a multiplayer feature directly into the story that's been there since the beginning of the game. It, of course, needs to be modified to fire a human out of it, which is done by Rupert's company, who apparently is an actual genius and probably designs all the tech in the company, and is assisted by the BB Brigade, who thanks Joe for just believing and accepting them. So the cannon's repaired, and we shoot ourselves into the castle and confront Rupert, Zonga Zonga. And it's a fairly standard fight, however, with the Zsaurs, or rather zombie Vivosaurs. After the first defeat, he begins transforming into a weirdly crazy dinosaur. We of course beat him, and the skull questions how we could possibly succeed, and we're told it deals with us believing in our Vivosaurs, you know, the whole power of friendship thing, which fairly works in this game. They've built it up decently enough. Zonga Zonga's skull is destroyed, and we're saved by Todd and Pauline, mirroring the beginning of the game. So actual Joe Wild West thanks us and still plans on honoring Zonga Zonga's deal to give us ownership of the islands. We refuse because of how Joe, being such a source of inspiration to us. Honestly, as like a 15-year-old child, I don't think I'd know the first thing of running a fossil park, so I kind of agree with this decision. Joe announces another tournament, and while everyone more or less thanks us for our help, Rupert with his father, Todd with his courage, and Pauline with her confidence, we more or less agree to stay the bestest of friends, and thus ends the main story. Most of the postgame just seems to be battles of sorts, nothing nearly as significant as Fossil Fighters 1. You do get Dino, Raptin, and Duna in fights if you can find it, how to download it online. I could not personally find out how to do this. There's also a character named Ryan from a manga which you can fight, which I'll talk more about the mangas again later. So that is the end of Fossil Fighter Champions. Plot-wise, we have the weakest game here in my opinion. The game starts us off by introducing the BB Brigade leader, Dr. Baron von Blackraven, as he and a man named Stryker go to duke it out with one another over an unsung plan which horrifies Stryker. So, starting off, we make the choice from male or female protagonists before joining the task force of wardens, a group started by Stryker to keep watch over the parks, basically park rangers. You, along with several others, convene for some reason in Stryker's personal office where he sends us out to learn the ins and outs of the Warden business, i.e. the tutorial. Here I'm interrupting this, as I'll probably do this throughout at this point, because I have a lot of gripes within the story. Unlike the other game's story, we're kind of given Warden without much trial or effort, for that matter. We only become the Calistio Patrol group after a couple of battles, and in hindsight was likely employed by Zongzong to keep his eyes on those he deemed problematic. And we're not even given a title in the first game, but we're effectively hailed as a hero by the end of it, and yet we get the highest title we're going to receive in this game almost immediately. Anyway, we meet up with Nate, one of the Paleo Pals, as he breaks into Professor Little's lab. Why Professor Little's doesn't lock his lab is also a mystery to me, especially as a secret door leads us to arguably the most narratively significant character in this game, as much as I loathe to say that. Nibbles, a strange Vivisaur who ends up biting Nate's butt and running away to a dig site. We followed to get him back before Professor kills us for losing what we believe to be an experiment. We drive into the dig site and confront a Gorgo that's costing our small dino friend and save him. He appears grateful and we return to the main base where Stryker pairs us up with Roland, who we meet earlier, and whose story significance is basically a fat joke punching bag, and go fight a rogue dinosaur in the park. Stryker tells us that our first assignment as wardens is to defeat the Gorgo that just attacks us, though the Gorgo is more clever than anticipated and destroys the bone buggies. It closes in for an attack, however, the little dino we saved earlier transforms and saves us, and we're returned to the base. We go confront the Gorgo one last time and defeat him and return home once again, where Stryker congratulates us. He then explains a little about the little dino who saved us and that we've somehow formed a bond. We then go fight in a small tournament to officially become a warden and are congratulated by Stryker alongside the other candidates, the exception being two, Sydney and Yamamoto. Everyone's given assignments, and we get the Jack of all trades assignment going around and helping in parks as needed. Professor Little then arrives and we're given our little dino friend, which we name Nibbles, and tie a random bandana around his neck. For what reason, I don't know why. Anyway, we're sent to Fossil Park America, first to escort alongside Leon, another new warden, a kid named Lucky as he goes excavating. Leon is the edgy lone wolf character archetype who ends up getting ambushed. We defeat the thugs, however, they escape with Lucky. After a stern talking to by one of the heads of the Fossil Park America, Leon and you head out to go save Lucky, and the second fight goes about the same as the first, with us winning. We're then told to head over to Europe by the head of the American park, and we're told to head over to Yodel Hills, before being informed that there's a problem with speedsters in the area dubbed the Speed Fiends. So we're tasked with stopping their leader, Big Mama. We fight the Speed Fiends only to find out that Big Mama is Dahlia, another of the new fossil wardens, who's obsessed with being the fastest. With conflicting allegiances, Dahlia challenges us to a race that if we win, she'll quit being Big Mama. After winning the race, Dahlia quits being Big Mama. The Speed Fiends becoming the Killing Fiends for a fight, and we're congratulated before being sent back to Stryker once we defeat them. We then head to Fossil Park Asia and meet up with Nate, who tells our character about the prologue and the BR Brigade, alongside another side tangent about how the bad guys are normally the BB bandits, and it bothers me that they chose BRB. Like, they changed it just barely enough to be recognizable, but why not just go the full mile and just change it completely to stay the BBB theme? We then go to Stryker's office, where he tells us he's technically not the leader of the Asia branch, and that title belongs to Liu Ren, who had our next assignment. Liu Ren tasks us and Nate to go to Lantern Lake to save the archaeologist named Digmore, who's being accosted by a rogue Vivisaur, and who's looking for an artifact, which is later remarked to look like a disc. We then head back to Liu Ren, who introduces us to Mi Lian, who wants us to fight with, specifically Nibbles. This is the only required fight with Nibbles in the entire game. After we win, the UN congratulates us and we're back to America. We were tasked with uncovering a dig site with a blocked road, which, lo and behold, is the result of the BR Brigade, who now regrouped with Dr. Baron von Blackraven once he escaped. They also escape with the Mega Electromonite, which, if you remember the first game, is capable of powering a city alone. For some reason, though, none of the characters propose the idea that they might be trying to power something. We then return to Stryker, who informs us that a rumor that there is going to be interference in a tournament, so we're tasked with entering the tournament. Actually, the game interestingly lets you decide to see which one to tackle first. The first, for the sake of argument, is the tournament, which more or less plays out the same as you'd expect, except a person outside the stadium named Elric tells us that if our journey ever hits a dead end, to look in someone's cell. That aside, the tournament ends with no incidents, after which we meet with Kowloon, a fighter who calls himself the Crow, in the tournaments. In tandem with his obviously evil appearance, he makes off with the trophy we'd won. We try to stop him, even beating him in a fight, before he vanishes into thin air. We've got no idea why he wanted the trophy, but we head off to Europe to deal with the other tournament. The other tournament in Europe is a race, which would be fun if you were actually racing somebody, but it's just a time trial, so we race alone. We do 2 races, one against a rando and the other against what's considered the fastest racer in the world, Mach 1. I beat him in a slightly modified version of the first car you're given. Anyway, we beat him and approached by a poor attempt at a Russian woman stereotype, who turns out to of course be a foreign spy stealing the trophy. We defeat her in a fight, and of course she somehow still manages to escape. And another break-off tangent, I get the whole disappear in the smoke thing for like ninjas and like random characters and shows and stuff, but when this game tells me an entire car can pull that trick off, you kinda lose the plot. So, having lost both trophies, we return to Stryker, who alongside us informs that the trophies are made of an extremely rare material mined by a company called Parsec Inc. that can only be found in deep space rocks, and so instead of researching potential uses for the metal, Parsec Inc. decides, let's make trophies out of them, because that makes sense. Having no idea how to move forward, we remember Elric's words to check out the cell, i.e. Black Raven's cell. You're telling me that the game's super genius vowing to destroy the world escapes, no one investigated his cell? Alright, I guess. Anyway, Stryker and Professor Little go to investigate the cell. Meanwhile, Nibbles is suddenly sick with yet another rare disease, viviscoritis, that requires 3 eel fossils to cure, and so we go to retrieve the fossils. Alongside the other paleopals we have who want to help. Nibbles, for some reason, don't know why they like him. We go to a new park, fight a rogue Vivisaur, retrieve the fossil, and bring it back to Nibbles. Lo and behold, Dahlia, who didn't listen to the full explanation, brings the wrong fossil back, so there's one missing, until Nate shows up, who, ashamed of not assisting him before because he was afraid of Nibbles, would bite him again, brings the actual fossil Nibbles needs, and Nibbles is saved. Enthused cheering ensues. We're called into office by Stryker, once again, who, after investigating the wall, found a formula for time travel, which involves Cosmonium and the Electromonite. We're then informed that the thing will only work where the time-space continuum is already through, and I'm sorry, there's locations which already have imbalances in the time-space continuum, and the only reason we know that is a small throwaway line? Alright. Like, absolutely zero gameplay relevance, just becomes a thing where the story needs that to be true. Anyway, moving on, we confront the BR Brigade, with Elric making some appearance helping us, I guess. We fight the lieutenants, defeat them, and the electromagnetic field stops us from fighting them because our cars are disabled and can't deploy fossil metals. For some reason. It's been established that throwing a dino disc is all that's needed to summon your Vivisaur, so I don't know how this works. Anyhow, our characters, believing for whatever reason they're unable to act, Stryker shows up, saves the day. Anyway, the BR Brigade disappear into the past and we reconvene. So the plan is to follow the BR Brigade into the past and stop them from brainwashing every single dinosaur in the past, and to do that we need Cosmonium. So for some reason we don't ask Parsec Inc. for it, but that might be because looking a little ahead, the Cosmonium that we're about to retrieve and the one that was in the trophies are supposedly the last Cosmonium in the world. Again, the company who couldn't find any immediate practical use for the material decided instead of researching it and experimenting with its properties, let's make a trophy. Also, given how rare Cosmonium is and how seemingly little info there is on it to deem it only useful for trophies, how does Dr. Blackraven know anything about it? I know it's a kid's game, but the game actively contradicts itself a lot. So anyway, we set off to find Cosmonium. First we stop at Fossil Park Asia, where Liu Ren talks about a hidden cave in one of the parks. We head there to discover a giant dragon, and Liu Ren explains that the dragon was created by an ancient sage who held a Cosmonium orb. We try to do a switcheroo, but the dragon awakens and we're forced to fight. We win, and the dragon now reluctantly accepts the switched orb and falls back to sleep. We then return back to base, where Liu Ren becomes our newest Paleopal. Next, we head over to Europe, where Violet tells us that a chunk of the super rare material is just lodged up a Vivisaur's nose. We go there with Sean, the leader of the Europe branch, to retrieve it. While Sean is normally timid and quiet, he goes into this berserk-like bloodlust when fighting. We win, get the Cosmonium, and attempt to flee, as in Drake's bloodlust, he also wants us dead, apparently. Finally, the American park, which is kind of interesting. We're introduced to a guy named Dino Gigante, a masked fossil fighter who's considered the best in the world, who on his belt has a large chunk of Cosmonium, which actually somewhat tracks with the trophy line earlier. And when we implore him to give us back the mask in the face of global catastrophe, he refuses, and hope that he'll be able to face off against his rival named the Flying Smile Kid. We tell Sean about it, and Becky suggests we make a pit stop at one of the parks where we excavate a mask, which we bring back to Sean, who is of course the Flying Smile Kid, and thus a tournament created between so they can fight again. We win and get the belt, obviously. Now, another side note, before we're introduced to Dino Gigante, I thought Frontier could have been some kind of soft reboot disconnected from the first two games, but there's a mention of a tournament in Callisto Isle by Lucky, which is disheartening, because we go from the Callisto Isles and Vivisaur Island to Europe, North America, and Asia. It's painfully boring. So we then assemble, gather our two supposedly most trusted Paleopals, and head back in time, which is the only chance we have, because once again, this is the last of the Cosmonium, supposedly in the entire world. So we go back in time, and, well, it's pretty boring. We drive through the equivalent of the park, approach the BB Brigade, they summon normal dinosaurs, and then suddenly Nibbles becomes more active, capable of firing dark energy, which destroys a device that's brainwashing all of the dinosaurs in the past, which will brainwash the Vivisaurs in the future, because memory apparently is stored in dinosaur bones. So, with the destruction of the device, for some reason, the portals stop collapsing, so we begin to flee alongside the escaping BR Brigade. As we're escaping, a random boulder hits the bone buggy. Of course it would, and unable to escape by our own means, Nibbles pushes us through the portal, but traps him in the past. It's played off as sad, but again, Nibbles had been basically a MacGuffin for when the story needs him to make an appearance, so our characters are sad because the story reasons I could care less. We're visited by several characters who try to cheer us up. Our character is obviously sad and depressed. Dahlia then makes an appearance and takes us on a mission to cheer us up. She succeeds till the Speed Fiends reveal it was just a ploy to cheer us up, and while we're somewhat disheartened, it seems we figure out that Fossil's dino disc we found towards the beginning of the game is none other than Nibbles, and we simply revive him. It's a problem for all of 5 seconds. We're then congratulated by Striker, who proposes a Warden tournament and tells us Dr. Blackraven has been captured. The tournament is the only difficult part of the game, really, because you lose basically all your Paleopals who retain all their ranking up they had, so it really sucks as a fight, especially as I use Paleopals who had elemental advantages over me. Eventually, you'll succeed, and we're congratulated on winning. However, a bone buggy steals Nibbles, taking him on the Neo Black Whale 2, which was constructed at the bottom of the ocean, and it's more or less revealed they captured a fake Dr. Blackraven, and the real one is now going to use Nibbles' dark energy as a catalyst to reawaken the Dreadosaurus, which is what Nibbles was supposed to be, apparently. We need to say Nibbles again, so we then proceed through a giant magnet and locate the Neo Black Whale 2. Use said magnet to pull the Neo Black Whale to the surface, and then board the Neo Black Whale, which is astonishingly huge. We go down the ship fighting Olga, who is revealed to have been brainwashed by Black Raven. No idea why she was so significant and why he brainwashed her, but alright. Go down, fight Calhoun, who I was presently surprised is just plain evil, laughing at the idea that he need to be brainwashed to fight us. And then we confront Black Raven, who's morphed Nibbles into the Dreadosaurus. We fight, we win, and through none other than the groundbreaking trope of the power of friendship, save Nibbles, and actually make him somehow stronger. Through the new transit formation, Nibbles spits out the dark energy, and Dr. Black Raven flees with it to the surface. We go to confront him and see no other than Dr. Black Raven transforms into a dinosaur bone buggy human hybrid called the Dread Raven. It's a relatively easy fight, which ends up destroying itself after we beat it. We're thanked for saving the world, credits roll, and then we're told we can more or less keep playing, and yeah, that's Falsifier Frontiers. Post-game is more or less the same as Falsifier Champions, which is just fight more creatures and level up, and I think there are a couple of secret paleo pals you can get, though I kind of just ignored them because I did not want to play this game any longer. This is gameplay notes for all three games. We're kind of be going in order, so starting broadly, the overworld in the first game is really nice, though a bit claustrophobic as the camera gives you quite the limited top-down view. The dig sites are designed well and have diversity in layout and so much in traversal, but again, that's alright. They're serviceable for what it intended to do. Colors are really where this game shines in my opinion, though as they're vibrant and quite beautiful in a way, especially with the increased resolution from the emulating game. Characters are some of the highlights of the game as the story I've grown has only improved in my eyes, albeit nothing earth-shattering, but sets up intrigue and stakes. My top three characters are your two companions, Duna and Rosie, and then Bulwart. In reverse order, Bulwart is set up as this nice police chief, though he always seems reluctant to do his job, which makes sense as it's revealed he's the BB bandit leader, manipulating things from his strong position. His conniving nature works in his advantage several times, presumably having convinced the Dinarians that he could retrieve the idols, creating or stealing tech to the Imperviray, and stealing Frigosaurus from the Digadig chief. Bulwart's tenacity to come out on top's honestly fun to watch. Rosie, albeit the spoiled daughter of Mr. Richmond, the island's founder, however, it seems she really doesn't use her grandfather's wealth and status beyond getting some info from him from time to time, with her even telling the MC that she needed to save up money. She's aggressive and comes under some rather funny hijinks like the Digadig spell and the reversion ray, but her relationship with the character feels really natural, especially by the end. Duna as well, being effectively a Dinarian princess, who's tasked with finding the idol comps and kinda accidentally forms a bond with our character, which makes her question her goal in the face of wiping all of humanity out. It's really fun unraveling. Excavation is what you'll be doing for most of the game in a similar fashion to Spectrobes, and this time they've already had the music since the first installment, so we're having much better improvements. The excavating is fine and all. You've got really two real tools. In Falsifighters, the drill and hammer, with a strong drill and hammer upgrade available for you to buy. While both series have timers that run while you excavate, Falsifighters ticks down, and so you're in a real rush for any perfect or getting as close as perfect as possible. And there are some weird fossils, unlike Spectrobes, where you get a block you can excavate it from. There's all sorts of shapes and types to this one, and the fossils are a much more fragile little ticks here or there that'll really reduce the fossil's value. Unlike Spectrobes, I don't think there's a way for me to perfect each and every fossil due to 1, it's incredibly time consuming, and 2, it's a lot of fossils with 100 different Vivisaurs with 4 parts each, which would mean 400 excavations total to perfect, and that's just the first game really. It'd be a headache to get all of them perfectly done, so I'm not going to do that. It's less important, however, to me, as the beginning stats don't really affect the potential future stats that can be earned via combat points from the battle. This was obviously a deliberate choice, as stated in the original developer interview, making the only thing that really matters being the fact that you'll get all Venusaur parts, as this gives you access to more moves. Another minor thing is the fact that there's these red fossils, which are essentially rare fossils, adding an extra 25 points to an excavation, which is fine. It just sucks that you can have a perfect 100% points clean, and then you have a new rare fossil which you clean at 80 points, which would net you 105 points. And so your perfect streak is ruined. Honestly, it's just a sticking point in my head. but for people who don't care, that's fine. These red rare fossils are also inside large black fossil blocks that can't be penetrated with a radar, so you'll have to feel your way around it, and make the minute-and-a-half count even more. Fighting is pretty simple early on and only kind of pinks at the gun nash part in my opinion, and the post game is actually really difficult surprisingly. If your Vivisaurs aren't already trained up, you gotta do a bit of grinding and get your Vivisaurs up to rank 12. It's fascinating considering you can have a fossil with the bare minimum to revive them and level them up to rank 12 through battle while raising another with only perfect fossils to get rank 12, and they'll be the exact same by the end. The former, however, just takes longer to accomplish. Another useful tool is Clean, a robot who can excavate fossils for you that you've done previously. Clean levels up as you clean or as you give him more fossils. I saw this was pointed out as a criticism of the fossil cleaning system in a review as an example of the developers really thinking that the process was tedious, but I'd completely disagree with that. It's a quality of life improvement because 1, there are 400 different Vivisaur fossils, not including dark fossils, which double that number of possible fossils, and the jewel rocks and some are pretty difficult to clean. Well, admittedly due to the way tools are set up. Clean remedies this as you level up, as you can let him handle the fossils you struggled with and get a higher score with him, while you clean the fossils and jewel rocks that you want to plus. He helps easily rack up dono points, which is a system that kind of helps in the late game of, I'm just looking for one specific fossil rock, here Clean, take the 50 while I look for one. It's a very useful tool. Speaking of searching for one specific fossil, 2 of them, which are both in the post-game, are T-Rex and Pocky, both of which you can find their bodies with relative ease, but their heads are frustratingly hard to acquire. I spend a good hour and a half looking for Rex's head. Post-game is mostly a couple battles and isn't too much to write home about, but hey, it's overall. Plus Vital Champions is an almost perfect sequel from an improvement standpoint, minus the story I'd argue. Largely same order as last time, the dig sites are very improved this time. While giving you a fixed perspective, it's honestly so much better, though the environment looks compared to the others is fantastic, and I'd argue is far superior to its sequel. So while this is the best looking game in terms of dig sites, their varied fossils, which it'll be further discussed within this part, also help set this game apart, and albeit small, I love the concept of unorthodox digging methods, such as gondolas in Rainbow Canyon and Mount Krakenak. It was interesting and spiced up a little bit of the game. It'd be nice to see different methods explored in a possible future sequel beyond this game, but, well, different is technically accurate, but the sequels is worse. Its colors, I'd argue, are also a little more muted than the first game, but it tracks with the new style they've added, and that's not to say this one is still very colorful. Characters are more hit and miss in this game, with some of the supporting cast being forgettable. Pauline and Rupert make good Durotagonists, and I feel like they're on the level of Duna and Rosie as written characters. Pauline feels consistent and almost an inverse to Duna's, in which she feels superior to humans being humbled and accepting them, with Pauline's being humble and shy growing to be more confident, minus the superiority complex. Like I said, the rest of the characters are much more dual and are much less interesting. Our replacement for Nevada, Monte Carlo in Indiana Jones parody is an archaeological explorer, Professor Scatterly, a scatterbrained professor who reads tablets. Admittedly, Monte Carlo didn't do much, but she's far more fascinating as a character from Scatterly, and most of the other characters follow this idea. Also, with Joe Wild West being inserted as the world's most famous fossil fighter, makes me question where Sarhead, our original MC, is. I mean, even Rosie at the end was a comparable fighter to us, so I don't know where they are. I know the sequel doesn't have to rely on the past game, but it makes me wonder what really happened, considering the Dinarians aren't really mentioned, and no one acknowledges Gungnash's destruction, despite the post-game. Excavation is vastly improved in this game. Starting with fossils, we have the introduction of Buster Points, a system in which relieves a lot of stress in excavating, especially using an emulator in which I can create save states between digging and using one of the Buster Probes, a consumable item used to see if there are even Buster Points on the fossil. Anyway, Buster Points shave off large parts of the fossils in order to clear much faster, and in some lucky cases, clear out an entire fossil itself. welcome addition in my opinion, though they should have also added some less effective buster points with giant fossils, but it's a nitpick in my opinion. Additionally, as I've sort of mentioned, they've added 2 new major categories of fossils, the giant fossils and a secondary type dubbed curious fossils. Giant fossils are, if you could guess, a giant fossil containing all 4 parts, and there's a vertical version of these and a horizontal one. They're seemingly intended for the multiplayer aspects in which you can dig out fossils alongside other players, but for a loner and emulator like me, the best method is to use a time up, or a watch that basically adds 30 seconds to the clock, though you can't go over the initial allotted 90 seconds. Anyway, when you complete the giant fossil, the whole score is compounded, so if you get 93, all parts of the revived Vivisaurs are going to be worth 93 points. And as far as I'm aware, there's no way to differentiate or improve the individual parts, so you just need to do another giant fossil. Another one of those things that I think should have been in a proper sequel would be giant fossils that would naturally advance certain parts of the fossil, while allowing for the individual score to increase, essentially to add an incentive to giant fossils, while also allowing for individual parts to exist alongside them. Then the curious fossils are essentially matted fossils from both sides, so you have to clean one side, flip it around. This one you can clear without time-ups alone, but I'd recommend it to get better scores. There's still dark variations of the covered fossils who also have buster points sometimes, which is nice compared to giant fossils. I haven't mentioned the tools really, because they're the same as the prior game. Fighting takes an interesting approach now, using a rotation system in this game, and it's a new system, though I prefer the first game in my opinion. Still, for the most part, keeps the spirit of the first system, so I used it in the same way, with the exceptions of some of the latter fights where I'd use one of the new formations with a specific Vivisaur. I'm sure there's more nuance to battling, but it's more or less went the same route as the first game in my opinion. I got overpowered and then really just never lost or felt even close to losing. Level ups also now go up to level 20 rather than 12. Not sure if it's a percentage issue, as in one level is 1/12 or 8% of its total power, and that a level up in the 20 system is only worth 5% of its power, or if 12 is 12 and 20 is just 8 levels more powerful than the original 12. Unsure. Fossil Fighter Frontiers. So, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but at least in my personal opinion, Fossil Fighters Frontier should stand as one of the de facto reasons that changing development studios is a bad idea for game development. Starting off is the movement system. Sometimes that should be the easiest to get right when you consider the only real rules established in the series are you move around a park environment, and if you incorporate the improvements in champions, occasionally more unique forms of movement, a la the gondola system. But suddenly this game introduces the car or bone buggy system. The new way to move around the park is to drive around said park, and while this wouldn't be so bad if it was drive to this location, get out, and then explore a handful of defined areas, you never leave the vehicle in this game. This is just how you do everything now. I will compliment the driving system, however, as much as I don't like it. The vehicles handle relatively well in tandem to the game. However, the system as a whole falls flat. So alright, moving on to excavating, well, we changed the system entirely again. Instead of collecting a bunch of fossil rocks, you excavate on the spot, which sounds nice till you get annoying as you excavate, finish, drive 5 feet to the next fossil, and repeat the cycle infinitum. What I assume was a choice to streamline the process makes the mistake of trying to blend the excavating and exploring systems until it looks like just terrible gameplay mess. The system of excavating has also changed dramatically, with what was initially an easy way to differentiate what you did or didn't have to clean is now just a mess in my opinion, and hard to see as the bones don't have as strong as a contrast to the background as they had in the previous 2 games. Not only that, there is a tool system which is relatively untouched, but problems emerge when you're given weight systems in the game. Now, during my playthrough to go through the game, I more or less ignored digging once I got the only Vivisaur I was going to use. I'll explain that more later. Weight systems mean you're only allowed to take fossils or tools that vehicles' suspensions can hold. So while it allows for more customization of the tools, it also means that your stronger tools are limited to the vehicle you're using. So the upgraded weight capacity of a vehicle is necessary to excavate some rare fossils, or rare fossils more easily, I should say. So unlike the first game where you can unlock the best tools at the beginning and simply by grinding for cash, this one makes it so that you need a combination of upgraded vehicles, vehicle body type, and actually, of course, buying the needed tool. It added 2 extra steps to a 1-step system, which, not even bringing up the other things, are affected by the weight stat, so you can't take all the tools you might want as well. There's just bad changes overall, in my opinion. Well, what about the battle system? How could you mess up a 3v3 battle system? They effectively remove the 3v3 aspect and stick you with the choice of 1 Vivisaur and 2 allies with preset Vivisaurs. I really despise this system, because it means out of the 74 Vivisaurs, you get to pick 1 and 2 other characters who have preset Vivisaurs to battle. Also, quick note of the 74 Vivisaurs figure is such a downgrade compared to the prior title. 162 were naturally obtainable Vivisaurs, a count meaning a net negative of 88 Vivisaurs, so over half. Not only that, this game only has actual reptilian Vivisaurs, so none of the interesting saber-tooths or mammoths, just plain old dinosaurs, which would have been fine if the precedent of the other games hadn't already been set. The characters in this game are redeemable, not particularly. Instead of giving us 3 or 4 really tightly fleshed out characters, relatively fleshed out, I know none of them see RPG levels of depth to make room for the Paleo Pals, we have like 12 who get a handful of lines and absolutely 0 real character development. I will note an interesting thing is the ability post-game to upgrade your Paleo Pals to Super Paleo Pals, giving them an extra Vivisaur to access. You can also gain new Paleo Pals by doing various side quests and missions, or just excavating, which is somewhat neat in my opinion if it actually worked in tandem with the other game. A lot of them are unlocked via post-game actions, and I really despise the game, but most can be unlocked via the tournaments. The only compliment I can give them is that I like most of their designs, in contrast to the male MC, who is overly designed in my opinion. Not necessarily a gameplay note, but the series' signature plot twist is also absolutely gone. We get the villain pretty much doing everything as one might predict, and one of my least favorite tropes in a video game is the side character that the developers desperately want you to like and grow attached to because they're important for the story. Legitimately, the forced to love character thing is so bad, as you're supposed to feel some sort of natural emotional resonation with Nibbles, the Vivisaur the game gives you at the beginning, but forcing the player to like something is never a good formula. A more modern example of this trope is none other than Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's Miraidon and Koraidon, who once again tell you you must love these things because otherwise the finale's emotional payoff won't work. This trope never works, in my opinion. I despised both these attempts. Still, the game actively makes you choose whether to even engage with the mascot character, because if you do choose to play the entire game with Nibbles, that means there's actually 0 point in getting any new Vivisaurs, since again, you can only use 1 Vivisaur at a time. Which begs the question, what's the point of acquiring other Vivisaurs if the game wants you to use Nibbles? The game is the worst rated in the series, and these are just some of the reasons why, and I've seen other people wondering why this game is so despised, given everything that's regressed on the previous title is why. And the game sold incredibly poorly, compared to the other two at least, possibly being the reason as to the series' current failure and why no sequel has really surfaced since. Altogether, the 3 games hold a pivotal role in my eyes of being an example of a great series start. Missing the second and getting to play it now showed me the perfect way to handle a sequel, and the third is a dismal look into what a series loses when it loses its visionaries. I'd like to say as a whole the games are overall well made and fun, with a tragic finale that lessens somewhat its legacy. I liked spitballing my ideas for a possible sequel to Spectrobes in that video, so I'll share mine on Fossil Fighters. 4 or 3 depending on if it's just more popular to decanonize Frontiers. I'm on the decanonize or leave out of the story side, so Yura and Nibbles are going to have to stay largely absent in my opinion. I personally call it Fossil Fighter Ancients, and focuses more so on the ideas present in Fossil Fighters 1 and involves story elements of 2. Effectively, the introduction would involve Hunter and Dino, now young adults, would be sent to investigate an underground excavation site which had been experiencing issues, as fossil fighters have gone missing and other agents sent by the Richmond Foundation, and a delegate of the Isling Chain's owners, which happens to be Joe Wild West, as he expands. Hunter is accompanied by an in-disguise Duna, while Dino is assisted by Todd. The two both greet each other with some familiarity, Hunter somewhat bragging about a winning record against Dino in some matchups that happen off-screen, but just friendly banter. The four enter the cave, and upon investigation, which accompanies some notable odd sounds and the four seeing a threat and preparing for a fossil battle, it's cutting to our main character, who for the sake of naming conventions will either be Carbon or Tria. I'll explain later, and their friend, who I think might be best to be whichever of the two character models the player doesn't select. As a silent protagonist, our friend explains that he's excited to be among the second ship to explore the Manus Islands, alongside us. A TV nearby, which has been on, comes to a head as Rosie Richmond, alongside a King Dynal and Raptin, petition in front of everyone of nondescript world leaders that humanity can work and live alongside Dinarians, as evident by the species' assistance in stopping Gunnash. This, I'm hoping, helps enforce the timeline between the first game and Champions is maybe just a couple of years at best, as fossil fighting more or less exploded in rampant popularity as a result of Diggins, and with both Joe and Sarhead claiming to the world's greatest being akin to the voted best food assign items that you see in restaurant windows. The two are then met with two other prospective fossil fighters, Vivian and Vic, who are of course twins, who seem out of place in their naivety about fossils. The ship lands on the first of the Manus Islands in the game, called the Lunade Islands. Lunade appears more like a conventional beach place, large with swaths of palm trees, shops by the pier, and large buildings, which would represent the Fossil Fighter Center, stadium, and dormitory that you're assigned to stay in. You and your friend are, of course, dorm mates, and your neighbors are the two twins we mentioned earlier. You would also meet a rather tall kid with long, shiny hair with a somewhat emo aesthetic. Trust me, there's a purpose behind the emo aesthetic. After you set your bags down, you and everyone else in your group are setting out to go on your first excavation expedition, sent off by a staff member as the doctor is busy in that area. You start out and collect fossils, while at some point in another area your friend rushes off thinking that's a good place to search, and eventually you join him. A cutscene reveals a lab-coated woman running from a rampant rogue Vivisaur. Clutching a small suitcase to her chest, she eventually drops it. A couple medals spill out, and you and her friend each grab a dino medal to help deal with a Vivisaur. Both you and your pal pass out exhausted as Pauline, one of the head reps of the Manus Island, shows up to assist bringing you, your friend, and the injured woman back to the center. You wake up last to find that your friend has been talking to the head researcher of the islands, Dr. Pickens. She explains she has testing out some new metal designs, and before some rogues attacked her. Your friend tries to give the medal he took back, but she refuses, stating that they've grown attached, and a whispered remark that she also needs some more guinea pigs. In comes Pauline, who tells off the doctor for running off without another staff member present, which she defends, of course, with just how excited she was to really try these things out. Then Dr. Pickens waves goodbye and saying she should really get back to her lab, but not before tripping over her lab coat's tail, to the dismay of Pauline and to the embarrassment of the others. Pauline explains then to you two that you've got an extension on your dig time in the first area, or you can use your new Vivisaur to earn your initial license, with your friend opting to head straight towards the stadium. The player is then free to choose either option, with after beating the initial license, you have a somewhat small celebration in which you see the emo neighbor leaving the party early. The next day rolls over and there's a second dig site open, an area which is much more beach than palm, a gimmick possibly involving the tide setting up kind of gimmicks on the various beaches, though one that complements the map. Eventually, some commotion is caused by the new BB gang, known as the BB Beast, a gang which focuses more on wild action than any plan and are beating up on a handful of the newbies, including Vivian. You, alongside your friends, face off against one of the BB Beast goons and take out your first of the many fights. Vivian thanks you, eventually explaining that Vic is off handling some business at the center and she wanted to go alone. She then mentions that the Beast have apparently been terrorizing the island, and mentions that they might be some remnant of an evil organization of the Callistio Island and Vivisaur Island. Effectively, they're a group made up of the disgruntled goons who weren't too pleased when the BB Bandits and BB Brigade dissipated. I'd like to cut off the intro there, but eventually continuing on, we get onto some major reveals exploring roughly 7 major dig sites and a cave system, and the reveal of a bit of a lore switch-up. that some of the seeds planted by the Denarians, the evolutionary seeds mentioned in the first game, didn't all land on dinosaurs, but instead in beetles, of which Vivian and Vic are members of their species, who, along an outing, stole Dinarian disguise technology. The beetle species is dubbed Coelovir. They're the ones who caused the subterranean disturbance, as they're effectively revived a large Earth-type Vivosaur akin to Ignosaur and Frigosaurus. But they've got a reason for this and aren't directly hostile, though it's treated as such throughout the majority of the story till they're defeated, including the major Vivosaur. The Coelovir then proceed to reveal that they weren't the only species who got a jump started by the Dinarians. The emo kid revealing throughout the story, named Eddie, is actually a member of the Anguicine, a fish species which evolved in tandem with the Coelovir. Both have been slighted by each other until it, of course, is revealed that the BB Beast are being headed by Bulwart, who's once again on his scheme stealing the legendary Vivosaurs from both species. He effectively takes control of the island with the two legendary Vivosaurs in a much more destructive scale, and by proxy subjugates parts of the Coelovir and Anguicine. It's clear that Bulwart has grown more sinister over the years, his control over the BB Beast being relayed as one of the commanding through fear, which would be relayed through some of the goons' defeat dialogue, which would indicate they were terrified of returning back to their base. Anyway, in the process of defeating the Coelovir, we freed Hunter, Dino, Duna, and Todd. To combat Bulwart, Hunter and Dino bring you and your new group to specific parts of Vivosaur Island and the Callistio Islands, specifically Mount Lavaflow and Ice Grip Plateau, respectively. They're where Ignosaurus and Frigosaurus' fossils are at rest, and they're of course being guarded by Apexes, the beast equivalent to the Brigade's lieutenants. The big fight ensues, and Bulwart and you have a sustained fight until Bulwart succumbs, though I'd like to think that there's some magic element in here caused by the Manus Islands that prompts a transformation like final boss, though I think this might be enough as is. The game ends, and your group, along with the others, are now expected and tasked with becoming diplomats on behalf of the two new humanoid species, and also you're a master fighter, of course, at this point. That's the gist of the story, and I apologize if it comes somewhat off as fanfic, but I'd like to think if there was a sequel, it would be really neat to see more of an impact of the first two games' events. Events that I'd like to think that would happen in between on this is revealing the BB Bandits and the BB Brigade's lieutenants now work for the Richmond Foundation and Joe's Wild West organization, King Dino teaching younger Dinarians how to accept humanity, Sarhead and Dino Gigante are heads of a dinosaur-themed fossil-fighting lucha league, which you can participate in post-game probably. The Diggity tribe now working alongside the Richmond Foundation to spread their culture, which introduce other Dig-a-Dig beyond Pauline. And yes, there are stuff I'd like to say, but the last thing I'd add back is Super Evolvers. Thinking on it, adjusting them to be more of an emphasis on stronger versions of your present Vivosaurs, rather than doing the wackier evolutions. Just, some consistency in most of them, as opposed to the drastic changes. In conclusion, Fossil Fighters is a game series with, again, a lot of potential. It falls into the same realm of possibilities that Spectropes has practically infinite possibilities. Nintendo is still the right holders to the IP, and while I admit it would be nice to have the OG developers back on the games, I don't think it'd be practical given the state of how some of them are. I think it would be nice if Nintendo wanted to use a new studio and give them a chance with this. I love Nintendo and would like to see them give some of their, quote, lesser IPs to some small devs like studios of 10 or 20 people, having one work on Kid Icarus, F-Zero, and of course, like Fossil Fighters. Let them try their hands with a longer dev time, but a more concentrated team. Now, there is some hope, as recently, or relatively recently, the copyrights of Fossil Fighters was renewed, and so hopefully it should make some comeback in the near future. I'm not entirely sure when, but that's it for Fossil Fighters. I hope to be uploading more stuff more frequently now, but we'll see. I'll see you later. Bye.